You're listening to a New York Yankees episode of the Jacob Valk Show. He's breaking down the team's latest goings-on as only he can. Follow him on Twitter at RealJacobValk. Here he is, Jacob Valk.
Hello, Yankees fans! Welcome to my 2021 New York Yankees preview here on the Jacob Valk Show. I am Jacob Valk. And the way I'm going to do this is I'm going to break down the starting lineup. I'm not going to go in batting order. Obviously, we don't know what it's going to be. Instead, I'll go positionally. So, catcher, infield, outfield. Then the starting pitchers. Then the relievers. Then the bench. The manager. And the GM. After that, I'm going to tell you what I think this team is going to do, where they're going to finish in the division, where they're going to finish in the playoffs, all that good stuff. And I've been looking forward to this for a long time, let me tell you. Last year I had a tough time getting into it because it was 60 games. They wrote me in the playoffs. I got into the Indians series. I got into the Rays series. This year, I'm going to be locked in, laser focused. The Yankees are my favorite team. Of my 4 favorite teams, the Yankees, Islanders, Jets, and Nets, the Yankees are my favorite. In fact, that's the order. Yankees, Islanders, Jets, and Nets. So look, I missed them last year. There's no question. This year they're back. I couldn't be happier. Spring training ended on Monday. So let's do this. The starting catcher for the Yankees is probably the most polarizing figure on the team. Gary Sanchez. Now, I've defended Sanchez a lot. There was some talk that the Yankees could non-tender him. I vehemently disagreed with that. I understand the frustration with Sanchez. The guy hit 147, for God's sake. If he had even been hitting his weight, that would have been a vast improvement. And yes, the defense is still below average. He led the American League in passed balls. He's never going to be Yadier Molina behind the plate. But the reality is, Gary Sanchez is a 28-year-old catcher that has 2 30-home run seasons under his belt. Those guys don't grow on trees. I mean, would I like the batting average to be higher? No question. But even if it's just 230 or 240, if Sanchez is hitting 20 to 30 home runs, I can live with that. In terms of pure power, Gary Sanchez may be the best catcher in baseball. I'm not willing to give up on Sanchez yet, but look, this is a make or break year for him. If he doesn't put it together this year, the Yankees are going to go looking for a new catcher. Do I think Sanchez can turn it around? Yes, absolutely. But he has just this year to do it. And even then, not the whole year. Like, if Sanchez gets off to a slow start in April, maybe May, you're going to hear a lot of calls for Kyle Higashioka. Let me tell you. First base, it should be Luke Voit. It would have been Luke Voit, but he got hurt. He partially tore the meniscus in his left knee. He's going to be out for at least 3 weeks. It stinks for a number of reasons. I mean, Voit was arguably the best Yankee last year. It's either him or Mayhew. Take your pick. The guy led the majors in homers with 22. It's one of the greatest heists in Yankees history. It's right up there with the Paul O'Neill trade. It's right up there with the Tino trade. Fantastic job of scouting. Unfortunately, since he's going to start the year on the IL, the Yankees' starting first baseman on opening day will be Jay Bruce. Look, I don't want to knock Bruce. The guy's had a good career. Multiple-time All-Star. Over 300 home runs. But for him to be the starting first baseman on opening day, that's tough. I mean, it doesn't get much worse than that. We think Voit is bad defensively. Bruce is going to be worse. In Jay Bruce's career, he has only played 54 games at first base. And the reality is, Bruce's best days are behind him. Bruce is best used right now as a backup outfielder. You want to have him as a backup first baseman? Okay. I can live with that. And I understand that the Yankees don't have a choice. They have to start Bruce at first. And look, he's a lefty. He has incredible power. Last year, he had 6 home runs in just 32 games. Almost a third of his hits were home runs. In 2019, in 98 games, he had 26 home runs. This is what the Yankees love. They love these guys who can't hit for a high average, but have a ton of power. And yeah, Bruce will strike out a fair amount. Not as much as Judge. Not as much as Stanton. But Bruce does strike out. Look, it's tough to begrudge the Yankees too much. They were forced into starting Bruce. This wasn't anyone's first choice. I think even Bruce would tell you, I'm glad to be starting, but I'm more comfortable in the outfield. I mean, they have those quizzes. Name all the Yankees starters on opening day. 20 years from now, when we're doing that quiz, 2021, opening day first baseman is going to be blank. You're going to think it's Voit? It's not Voit. You're going to think it's Ford? It's not Ford. You're going to think it's LeMahieu? Nope. He's at second. It's Jay Bruce. He will be mentioned for time immemorial in the same breath as guys like Lou Gehrig, Don Mattingly, Jason Giambi, and Mark Teixeira. Unreal. Speaking of LeMahieu, he's going to man the keystone for the Yankees. The Yankees had to bring him back, and they brought him back at a very reasonable rate, 6 years, $90 million. Since coming to the Yankees, DJ LeMahieu has been fantastic. He's been exactly what they've needed. A guy who can balance out that lineup. A guy who's not going to swing for the fences every at-bat. He'll be okay with singles and doubles. LeMahieu led the majors in batting average last year with .364. In his 2 years with the Yankees, he has finished in the top 4 of MVP voting both years. He was an All-Star in 2019. He would have been an All-Star in 2020. You gotta love Le Machine. At third base, we have Gio Urshela. A guy who you forget about, right? Like when someone says New York Yankees to you, you think of Judge, you think of Stanton, you think of Cole, you think of LeMahieu. It would take you a while to get to Urshela, right? The simple fact is, since coming to the Yankees, Gio Urshela has probably been one of the best third basemen in baseball. Hovers around 300, gets a bunch of RBIs, absolutely fantastic defense. Last year, I don't care that he only played 43 games. Last year, he only committed 1 error. That is absurd. The guy is absolutely taken away starting third baseman from Miguel Andujar. Andujar is an afterthought. He has no place on this team. It's Urshela time. At shortstop, we have Gleber Torres. Probably the most disappointing Yankee of last year. If you want to say Stanton or Judge, I understand where you're coming from, but no, I think Torres was more disappointing. Stanton and Judge were disappointing because they got hurt. Neither one of them played in more than 30 games. But you know those guys are going to spend time on the IL. Torres, you didn't see that drop-off coming. This guy went from hitting .270 with 30 homers and 80 RBIs to hitting .243 with 3 homers and 16 RBIs. I mean, there was a big stretch of games last year where Torres was really bad. Because of that, some people are down on Torres, and I understand why. But I don't think anyone is really seriously saying that the Yankees should move on from him, like some people are saying about Sanchez. It was 60 games. It was an absolute joke. It's very easy to look past it. Christian Yelich, one of the best players in baseball, won the batting title in the National League in 18 and 19, won the MVP in 18, runner-up in 19, hit .205 last year. I'll tell you right now, I'll take Christian Yelich in a heartbeat. Don't worry about Torres. He'll be fine. He'll bounce back. I promise you. Moving on now to the outfield. And I will start with my close and personal friend, Clint Fraser. Oh, did I get him wrong. Last year, I said he's going to do nothing. He'll be dreadful, blah, blah, blah. It was on one of the Yankees shows last year. You can go back and listen to it. I got it wrong. Fraser had an outstanding year. Hit .267 with 8 homers and 26 RBIs. Did an excellent job filling in for Judge. The defense was much better. It seemed like Fraser finally put in the work. You know, he was humbled by his past experiences. The terrible game that he had against the Red Sox on Sunday Night Baseball. It seemed like that woke him up. And he said, okay, it's time for me to put my nose to the grindstone if I want to make it in this league. And look, he earned the starting left fielder job. Make no mistake about it. Clint Fraser should be the starting left fielder for the Yankees. If you were going to keep him, he had to start. He had to start over Talkman. He had to start over Gardner. That's the right decision by Aaron Boone. But I would caution you on what you think Fraser's going to do this coming year. Baseball Reference thinks he's going to hit .257 with 19 homers and 62 RBIs. It's hard for me to argue with that. That's a good season, but that's not a great season. And I think that's what Fraser's destined to be. Good, not great. A lot of people are setting sky-high expectations for Fraser. They love this kid. They think he's can't miss. Fraser can be good, and that's a big step up from what I was saying last year when I was ready to trade him. I think Fraser will do a solid job in left field. I don't think he'll be great. At center field, until he gets hurt, although granted he didn't get hurt last year, surprisingly, is Aaron Hicks. But even then, with Hicks being healthy, he hit just .225. 6 homers, 21 RBIs. Look, the guy draws a lot of walks, makes pitchers work, good top-of-the-order hitter, great defense. I get all that, but I don't like him. I just think he's massively overrated. Brian Cashman loves him. And part of that is probably because he stole him from the Twins for John Ryan Murphy. I get all that, but let's be honest. Hicks isn't that great. He's not even that good. I don't care about sabermetrics. I don't care about analytics. Get hits. You know, I gotta tell you, there's more skill in getting a hit than there is in getting a walk. Getting a walk, you're literally standing still. You're doing nothing. I'm not saying it doesn't take skill to draw a walk. You've still got to have a good eye. You may have to foul off some tough pitches, but it's a lot harder to get a hit where you have to make good contact, hit them where they ain't, hit the ball with the sweet spot of the bat, than it is to draw a walk. I like that he's a switch hitter. It adds a little bit of a different look to a very righty-heavy lineup. And obviously the defense is great. But Aaron Hicks is massively overrated. 7 years, $70 million. I don't care that that's $10 million a year. He shouldn't have gotten 7 years. That's a joke. Speaking of Aarons, we are on to Aaron Judge. You know Judge. You love Judge. I love Judge. I have a foul ball of his that I got him to sign, proudly displayed in my room. If I have to leave this house and I can only take one thing with me, that's what I'm taking. But Aaron, I'm talking to you, buddy. Part of being great is staying healthy. And you have had injury concerns the past 3 seasons. Enough. You're the face of the Yankees. You're the guy who they market more than anyone. You're the guy who has a section named after you. Something that no other player in Yankees history has had. Stay healthy. Cut down on the strikeouts, which, granted, you did last year. I understand that obviously the total strikeouts went down, but if you look at strikeout percentage, it was the lowest of his career. So, seriously, good job, Judge. The walks went down, which I actually liked. See, Judge used to be a guy who really keyholed. If the ball was a millimeter outside the strike zone, he was taking it. Swing at it. You're going to make good contact. I don't want you drawing a walk. I want you getting hits. You're Aaron freaking Judge. More often than not, you're hitting it out of the park. Think about it. Mayhew gets on. Next up is Judge. Judge moves Mayhew over with a hit. You've got runners at the corners more often than not. The biggest thing with Judge is health. It seemed like his batting approach improved. Good job there. Obviously, he's a sensational fielder. Because he's so blasted tall, he can rob home runs with ease. He barely has to jump. Aaron Judge has not made an error since 2018. Just stay healthy. Speaking of staying healthy, Giancarlo Stanton. A guy who in the past 2 seasons has only played in 41 games. Now, it did seem like he was rounding into form in the playoffs. He was the best playoff performer that the Yankees had last year. He was their answer to Randy Arozarena. And you gotta think that he'll stay healthier by not playing the outfield. Stanton wants to play the outfield. If I'm Boone, if I'm Cashman, I'm saying to him, you're never playing the outfield again. Get it out of your head. It's not happening. I would rather pick out a little kid in the stands and have him play the outfield than Giancarlo Stanton. He needs to stay healthy. When Giancarlo Stanton is healthy and he's 100%, he's one of the best players in baseball. The thing is, though, we haven't seen that the past couple years. The biggest question mark with the Yankees is health. We know that these guys are talented. They just need to stay healthy. Moving on now to the starting rotation. Obviously, it starts with Gerrit Cole. What can I say about Cole that hasn't already been said? I love this guy. I love everything about him. I was doing a fantasy baseball draft on Friday. I had the choice. Gerrit Cole or Jacob deGrom. Guess who I picked? Mr. Cole. He is one of the best pitchers in baseball. This guy just understands what it means to be a Yankee. He wants that pressure. He feeds on it. He was asked by someone if anyone told him that he was going to start Game 5 of Yankees-Rays. He looked right into the camera. Stone cold look. The eyes of a killer. And he just said, nobody needed to tell me. Be still, my heart. There was a Drake and Josh episode. Remember Drake and Josh? I grew up on Drake and Josh. There was an episode where Drake wanted to preserve Josh's pool shooting arm because Drake was making a lot of money hustling people. So when Josh made himself a bowl of soup, Drake came in and started feeding him the soup because he wanted to preserve Josh's arm. I would do that for Gerrit Cole. Whatever it took to preserve his arm, I would do it. After that, there are a lot of question marks. I'll go to Jameson Taillon next, although maybe I should save him for last. Because he's technically the fifth starter. The rotation to start out the year is going to be Cole, Kluber, Hermann, Montgomery, Cole, and then Taillon. I mean, it makes sense. In all seriousness, it does make sense. Preserve Taillon's arm. The guy hasn't pitched since 2019. He's coming off Tommy John surgery. Yeah, you've got to handle him with kid gloves. I understand that. I really don't mind it. I'll probably mind it in the dog days. But for now, I'm okay with it. I like Taillon a lot. He has really good stuff. Obviously, him and Cole know each other. They played on the Pirates together. When healthy, Taillon is a fine number 2. But the key words there are when healthy. The Yankees just dealt with James Paxton, a guy who they thought could be a good number 2. Couldn't stay healthy. And even when he was traded to the Yankees, he had injury concerns. There's risk with Taillon, there's no question, but it's a worthwhile gamble. I like Taillon. I think he'll do a good job. The same thing with Corey Kluber. It's kind of funny, the Yankees are handling Taillon with kid gloves. Not Kluber? Guy who's only pitched 8 games since 2019? Taillon's actually not that far off from him. He's only pitched in 7 games since 2019. Again, worthwhile gamble. We know the kind of pitcher Corey Kluber is when he's healthy. 2-time Cy Young winner, 3-time All-Star. Once upon a time, he was one of the best pitchers in baseball. He was the ace of a pennant winner. Again, though, you've got to be concerned with his health. The Yankees made 2 big moves to fortify the rotation, trading for Taillon and signing Kluber. That's a risky bet. It can pay off, there's no question. But it can also blow up in Brian Cashman's face. Next up is Jordan Montgomery, a guy who I really like. He had a great spring training. And I think he can be a solid 4 starter in this league. I know he didn't have a good year last year. 2-3 with a 5.11 ERA. But in his one playoff start against the Rays, he only gave up 1 run. Granted, 4 innings, but still, 1 run. He's the only lefty the Yankees have in that rotation. They need Montgomery. And again, I do like him. I do think he's going to have a bounce-back season. That brings us to Domingo Hermann. A guy who stupidly had to fight for his rotation spot in spring training. That was Hermann's job to lose all along, I thought. Instead, it seemed like there was a real competition between him, Davy Garcia, Michael King, Nick Nelson, those guys. Look, Domingo Hermann did something absolutely reprehensible. There is no question about it. Don't leave your relative that just so happens to be a woman in a room alone with Domingo Hermann. And yeah, the thing about leaving baseball and then retracting it, that obviously didn't endear himself to anyone. He was probably going through a lot of stuff at the time, and he said something emotionally. The guy's human. I can forgive him for that. I can't forgive him for the domestic violence, but I can forgive him for the leaving baseball. And also, don't tell me that you don't want any people associated with domestic violence on the Yankees. Alright? Eraldis Chapman. In 2019, Hermann had 18 wins. He went from someone who you viewed as a quadruple A player to a key contributor for the Yankees. I mean, that suspension, when it happened, really threw the Yankees for a loop. But if Hermann stays on the straight and narrow, the Yankees have one of the best fifth starters in baseball. Speaking of Eraldis Chapman, he is obviously the Yankees' closer. In the regular season, Eraldis Chapman is one of the best closers in baseball. But then when the playoffs hit, my God, the guy does his best Byung-Hyun Kim impression. 2019, he gives up the pennant-winning home run to Jose Altuve. Last year, he gives up the big home run to Brasso. You can't do that if you want to be the closer of the Yankees. No one cares if you get 30 saves in the regular season. That's great. That's all well and good. If you fold in the playoffs, that's all anyone remembers. Look, I like Chapman. I'm not giving up on him. But if the Yankees have another postseason loss because of Eraldis Chapman, he needs to be traded. In fact, you could have made the argument that they should have traded him in this past offseason. But obviously, they weren't going to do that. They weren't going to tinker with the bullpen too much. They traded Ottavino. They let Canely go. They really had to keep Chapman. Chad Green and Darren O'Day are the setup guys. That's perfectly fine. They're two quality relievers. You can't have an issue with it. Zach Britton would be the eighth inning guy, but obviously he's hurt. We won't be seeing him until late May or early June. But Green and O'Day will be fine. Moving on now to Luis Cesar and Jonathan Lewisica. Two guys that seem to have etched themselves in stone in terms of future plans for the Yankees bullpen. Cesar has turned into a solid reliever after doing nothing his first few years with the team. And Lewisica has gotten better and better. Obviously, he can start if you need him to. I'm very comfortable with those guys, and I never thought I would say that. Good job by the Yankees in developing them. That brings us to the back end of the bullpen. Michael King, Nick Nelson, and Lueke. It's hard to get a read on King and Nelson since their only extended action in the majors was in the 60-game joke. Neither one of them were that effective. But I'll say this. Nelson did have a really good spring. He went 1-0 with a .9 ERA. So Nelson earned his way on the team. I have no issue with him. Michael King, in a perfect world, probably wouldn't be on the Yankees, but I'm willing to give him another chance. He's 25. He's expendable anyway. If he doesn't work out, okay, no big loss. It's just hard for me to get too excited about him. But let me tell you, I'm really excited about Lueke. Not just because of his name, but the story is fantastic. This guy hasn't pitched in the majors since 2015. He suffered setback after setback after setback. And now he forces his way onto the Yankees after a dominant performance in spring training where he only made 2 bad pitches. With Justin Wilson out, I have no problem with Lueke filling in. I'm going to be rooting for him hard. In fact, when Wilson comes back, I may end up calling for King to be sent down instead. I mean, I'll tell you, my favorite players growing up weren't the guys like Jeter and Mo and Bernie and Georgie and Pettit. It was the grinders. The last guy on the roster. The guy who had to claw tooth and nail to earn his way onto the team. Guys like David DeLucci, Kareem Garcia, Andy Phillips, Bubba Crosby, Shelly Duncan, Dean Anna, Yangervis Solarte. Those were my guys. Luke's in that same mold, man. I'm really rooting for him hard. That brings us to the bench. It's Kyle Higashioka, Tyler Wade, Brett Gardner, and Mike Talkman. Higashioka is a fine backup catcher. He's another catcher with some pop. In the past 2 years, he has a .490 slugging percentage. And last year he hit .250. So, hey, Mr. Sanchez, there is another power-heavy catcher waiting in the wings who can hit for a better average and play better defense. I'm not comfortable saying that Higashioka is the Yankees' catcher of the future. But if he plays the bulk of the games this year, I can live with it. I think Higashioka would do a decent job. Tyler Wade is all speed, nothing else. It's very hard to get excited about him. The Yankees thought his bat would develop. It never did. He has a role on the team because he's really fast and he can play basically every position. You just don't want him starting. Brett Gardner is back because he's been a lifetime Yankee. He's going to keep coming back until he retires. Now, I give him credit. He could have very easily said, you know what? Unless you start me, I'm not coming back. He could have put the Yankees over a barrel, but he didn't. He signed back knowing that he's going to be a backup. Now, he'll get a chance to play because Hicks and Judge are injury prone, but I do give Gardner credit for that. He is this generation's Roy White. The Yankees like keeping their lifers around. I really don't have any complaints with Gardner. I'm not incredibly comfortable with him starting a lot, but I can live with it. That brings us to Mike Talkman, a guy who the Yankees seem to be down on. And I don't get why. You know, Talkman hurt his shoulder last year. That's why he didn't have any power. This guy has speed, is a really good defender, will hit for a solid average. I like Talkman a lot. In fact, I'd be more comfortable buying Mike Talkman stock than Clint Fraser stock. I think Talkman can be very good if he's given the opportunity. I just don't know if he'll ever get an expanded role with the Yankees. That brings us to Aaron Boone, the Yankees manager. There is something to be said about making the playoffs in your first 3 years as manager. And the fact that that came with the Yankees when you came out of the broadcast booth and had no experience whatsoever as a coach, manager, whatever, that's impressive. But enough is enough. This team has gone far too long without winning. You know the story. They haven't won a pennant since 2009. It's the first decade in modern history that the Yankees haven't even made a World Series. It's up to Boone to get them there. No excuses this time around. Win. It's just that simple. And Brian Cashman needs to help him. There's no question. This standing pat at the deadline, it doesn't work for me. If this team has holes, you know what? You've got to convince Hal Steinbrenner to open up the checkbook. Come the trade deadline, this team will have at least one hole. The law of averages says that it will. Enough standing pat. Go out there and address it. Because let me tell you, if this team doesn't do anything, I don't care if they make the playoffs. I want them to at least win the pennant. If they don't do that, get rid of both of them. But fortunately for Boone and Cashman, I really think this Yankees team is going to win the pennant. The American League this year is really weak. I don't want to get too far into it. I want to save it for my MLB preview, but there are really only like 2 teams that I think can give the Yankees a run for their money in the American League. The Blue Jays and White Sox. I think the Yankees are better than the Blue Jays. I don't have much faith in that pitching staff. And I think they're better than the White Sox. The Eloy Jimenez injury would concern me if I was a White Sox fan. I really think that the Yankees are going to win the division and are going to win the pennant. Tomorrow's show is going to be a big MLB preview. I'm going to go division by division, telling you where I think each team is going to finish, and I'll give you my World Series pick. It's opening day. There's nothing I would rather do than talk about baseball on a regular episode of the Jacob Valk Show that falls on a normal day for MLB opening day. Until then, I am Jacob Valk saying that on my last trip, I spent $1,200 on tips to bellhops to take luggage to my room.